Well, hi, everybody. My name is Rachel Roth. I'm the Vice President of the Wichita Audubon Society, and we're back with another one of our virtual program meetings. And I'm very excited to have Mark Glenshaw with us here tonight to do his presentation, which I will introduce in just a minute. Before we get started, just like a couple of announcements here. I'm going to pull up my notes. We are actually doing the field trip this Saturday at Salt Plains in Oklahoma. It's social distanced and masks required. So if you're interested in going on that field trip, we're meeting there. You can find some information on our website. And tonight, as Mark is presenting, I'm going to be watching the comments section on both YouTube and Facebook, where we are streaming this presentation. So if you have any questions at all for Mark, post those in the comments, and I'll make sure that we have time at the end for us to ask Mark all of our pressing questions about his work and his owls. So I guess that's all. I will be posting some handy links for you guys, like a link to Mark's work and our website once we get this presentation on the road. But without any further ado, let me introduce Mark. So Mark H.X. Glenshaw is an award-winning naturalist who has closely observed and documented the lives of great horned owls in Forest Park in St. Louis, Missouri. Yes, he is a distanced, speaking to us tonight from a distance. uh, he's been documenting those owls in St. Louis, Missouri since December 2005. He shares his work on his blog, Forest Park Owls, which you can find at forestparkowls.blogspot.com. The owls and his work with them have received regular coverage from local and regional media spanning the spectrum of TV, radio, print, and the web. Mark does extensive outreach work with the owls. He leads dozens of owl prowls in Forest Park each year. He also gives scores of talks each year across Missouri and Illinois and beyond to a wide range of different groups. He was awarded the Citizen Scientist Award by the Academy of Science St. Louis in 2006. And Mark is a certified Missouri Master Naturalist and a volunteer for Forest Park Forever. A native of Washington, D.C., and the son of an American mother and South African father, he is a dual citizen of both nations. Mark has his bachelor's degree in history with a minor in communications and journalism from Washington University in St. Louis. Mark's talk, Forest Park Owls, Hiding in Plain Sight, will cover how he found these owls, basic facts about the species, and the different behaviors he has been able to see and document with photos and videos to illustrate these behaviors. So with that wonderful introduction, Mark, why don't you take it away?
Thank you so much, Rachel. Very kind introduction. And I really want to just take a very key moment here and thank Rachel and all of her colleagues and all the members of Wichita Audubon Society for making this talk possible. A lot of things go into this to make these things go. So thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Wichita Audubon Society. And most importantly, thank you all for joining in tonight. I'm really excited to be presenting. I wish I was in Wichita. This is going to be my first talk in Kansas. So I was really looking forward to not only going to Wichita, but going back to Missouri, crossing the border, and saying that movie line that you always have to say when you leave Kansas. Now, I'm really excited to be presenting for you guys, but I really want to start with a key, quick bit of reassurance. Even with Rachel's very generous introduction still ringing in your ears, I may need to reassure you that I'm the right person to talk to you about owls. And I say that because most of you are meeting me for the first time. And since you're meeting me for the first time, you're noticing things about me. And I'm sure high on that list of things you're noticing about me is the frankly appalling and ever growing lack of hair on my head. So I might need to reassure you that I do. I really do study owls and not bald eagles. Now, don't get me wrong. I think bald eagles are awesome. This is one that I photographed in the territory of the owls that I study, and I'm always excited to see a bald eagle. But I really do focus my efforts on owls. So with that in mind, I always want to address a key question very early. Anytime I talk about the owls, whether it's something more formal like this, or just talking to a neighbor or a colleague, and I mentioned that I study owls and I've been doing so for a long time, the first and best question comes up really fast, and that is, so how did this all begin? And that's really the key question, because this isn't something that you just roll out of bed one day and decide to do. No, this began very gradually and very organically. And it began with two seeds. So the first seed is that I'm sure, like many of you watching tonight, ever since I was a young child, I've had a strong interest in wildlife. This interest has never gone away, but I found that in the early 2000s, this interest was really coming up to the forefront in a way it hadn't for some time. So that's seed number one. Seed number two is that ever since I moved to St. Louis in 1995, I've lived close to Forest Park. And I've moved a few times in the intervening years, but I've always stayed in the orbit of Forest Park. And as this interest in wildlife was coming up to the forefront, I thought, well, where can I study wildlife close to my home? And I put two and two together. Hey, let's study the wildlife in Forest Park. Now, anytime I give a talk for an organization or an institution more than an hour away from St. Louis, and especially virtually, I may be talking to people from way up in New England or out in the Rockies or on the West Coast or what have you, or internationally. I think it's important to talk a little bit about where I studied these great horned owls, to talk a little about Forest Park in St. Louis, Missouri. And that's one of the park's new entrance walls with beautiful fall foliage. And I think it's important to do so because not everyone has been to St. Louis, not everyone has been to Forest Park. And there are some truly special things about Forest Park. So first of all, Forest Park is very large. It's really big. This picture you're seeing is an aerial photo of just a sliver, a fraction of the park. How big is it? Just under 1,300 acres, making it one of the largest urban parks in the United States. And in fact, it's even larger than Central Park in New York City, where I used to live before I moved to St. Louis. And people love Forest Park because it's an oasis of nature and calm away from our busy city, but it's also home to several of the region's major cultural and educational institutions. In this picture here is the St. Louis Art Museum, and just to the east of it, to our left here, is the St. Louis Zoo. So people come to Forest Park in huge numbers. 13 million visitors use Forest Park each year. And to put that figure in context, the population of the state of Missouri is about 6 million. So lots and lots of people come to Forest Park, and not just from the Midwest, but from literally all over the world. In fact, the world came to St. Louis. The Forest Park was the center, the home of the 1904 World's Fair. So 1904 or 2020, the world comes to Forest Park. And the park is very well regarded. You can see this from this list of recent accolades and awards from national organizations and national media outlets. It's not just me thinking, oh, Forest Park is really cool. Lots of other people do. And the park does have a lot of the things you would associate with an urban park: turf grass, horticultural areas, sports fields, things like that. But it also has great habitat diversity. Within Forest Park, there are two types of forest. There are lakes, streams, a river system, wetlands, woodlands, prairies, savannas, and approximately 45,000 trees put the forest in Forest Park. So even though I didn't know Forest Park very well, I felt pretty confident that looking for wildlife in Forest Park would be worthwhile. And my assumption was proved correct very quickly. And I quickly fell in love with the park and its wildlife because I began to see an incredible range of wildlife, from animals that I had seen before, like red-tailed hawks. And for St. Louis folks, I photographed this guy right by the World's Fair Pavilion. I also began to see animals I had seen maybe once or twice in my life, like muskrats. If you're not familiar with muskrats, they're large aquatic rodents, smaller than their cousin, the beaver. And this muskrat, for St. Louis folks, this is about a couple hundred yards west of the Muni. I also began to see animals I had never seen before, like coyotes. Now, my friend Edward Krim took this photo, but I'm happy to say I saw those same coyotes on the very same morning, December 21st, 2009. And these coyotes were not in some wild, remote area of Forest Park. No, they were about 100 yards or so from the front doors of the St. Louis Art Museum. Now, I mentioned my friend Edward taking this photo, and I say that not only to give him credit, but to point out a key distinction. Edward is a professional photographer. I, on the other hand, am a naturalist who takes pictures. And I hope you enjoy my photos and videos tonight, but I definitely want to make that distinction very clear and for you to know that it's very clear in my mind. And more than ever, I really began to take a closer look at and spend more time with and more time learning about birds like this great egret having a snack over by the ice rink. So very quickly, I was hooked on the park and its wildlife, but I had not seen owls. I knew that there were owls in the park from talking to reputable people, from reading reputable sources. But I wasn't surprised that I wasn't seeing owls in Forest Park. I knew very little about owls. I can never quite emphasize this enough, but I did know a couple of key things, mostly that owls are really hard to find. And they're hard to find for three key reasons. One, their camouflage is absolutely incredible. It's not only color, it's texture and behavior. Two, they're mostly active at night. And if that wasn't enough, they fly fast and silently. So I really wasn't looking for owls. I wasn't hopeful that I'd see one. I thought, okay, that's great. They're here. It's probably not in the cards that I'm going to see them. Without even trying, one day I finally saw owls. And I wish I'd written this date down. As Rachel noted, I studied history, and history is more than dates and names, but those are pretty important at the same time. But I can tell you it was not far from where we are now, but in late August, early September 2005. And at this point in my life, I lived on the east side of the park and I worked on the west side of the park. And on this particular day, I had one of those very tough days of work that we've all had, whether it's virtual or in person. It's one of those days that drags you up and down from start to finish. And the day ended, and I thought, I'm not going to go home in my usual fashion. I need some nature time. I'm going to walk home and de-stress and decompress. And I know I'm going to feel better in 5 minutes. Pardon me, never mind, 55 minutes when I get home. And it was such a long day at work that by the time I left, the sun was already setting. And by the time I got to this particular natural area, which I was just in about 4 hours ago, the sun had set even further. And I was walking through this area, looking around, listening, and I was about 100 feet past this dead tree when out of nowhere, I heard hooting. And again, I put two and two together. And I thought, I'm hearing hooting. It's right around sunset. That has to be owls. And I went back to that dead tree, and there in that tree were two great horned owls. Now, again, I knew very little about owls, but I knew enough to know that they were great horned owls. Very large, and with two things on top of their heads, which I was pretty sure were not horns or antlers. I thought they might be ears, but I learned later they're just groups of feathers called tufts. Tufts. More technical term for tufts, really good for your next game of Scrabble, plumicorns. Plum acorns is the spelling. So again, knew very little about owls, but I knew, wow, these are great horned owls. And I was incredibly excited because this was only the second time in my life that I had ever seen an owl. The first time was 14 years earlier on the other side of the world in a park not far from my granny's home in South Africa, in Johannesburg, South Africa. But I was even more excited because it was my first time seeing owls in Forest Park. And I was incredibly lucky because in the next 20 to 30 minutes, I had such an amazing first sighting. In that brief span of time, I saw the owls hoot together in a duet, a beautiful, vocal and visual display. This haunting sound, these beautiful motions. I saw the owls fly, fast, powerful, ethereal in flight, just enchanting. But the owls were not done. They still had a cherry on top moment yet to provide, and that occurred when, much to my surprise, one of the owls chased a great blue heron. Now, great blue herons are twice the size of the great horned owl. They're powerful predators in their own right, but this heron was terrified and it flew off, squawking and croaking in panic and alarm like so. That was one terrified great blue heron. I was one totally hooked naturalist. Here, these owls had taken my love of Forest Park and its wildlife, and they just poured gasoline on the fire. So I walked home, my eyes doing very good impressions of saucers. I got home. I told my girlfriend Wendy about every moment, every beat, and I paused and I reflected and I thought, what do I know about owls? Practically nothing. Let's change that. Time to hit the books. Went to my bookshelf and I pulled off this book, Owls by Connie Toops. It was the first book on owls that I owned. I bought it a few years earlier at a library book sale. And I thought, hey, I've only seen that one owl, but I've always liked owls, and it's $2, and it looks like a pretty good book. Pulled it off the shelf that night and read about 80% of it. And a superb book to start with. But I didn't stop with that book. I have a few more since then. I now have over 50 books on owls, and I'm always looking for new books, old books that I've missed, new journal articles, anything and everything that can teach me about owls overall and teach me about great horned owls specifically. Because I already knew a key thing about studying not just wildlife, but anything in nature, whether it grows on the ground, flies in the air, swims in the water. You have to do the homework, you have to do the field work. And I know I'm preaching to the choir to many of you tonight, but I think it bears stating that you have to learn the facts. You have to sit in your favorite chair and just absorb the facts. What I'm sharing with you tonight is not from 20 minutes on Wikipedia, but from serious, serious research. But you also have to put on your boots and head out to the field and observe things with your own eyes and ears. And what's great is each type of work helps and inspires the other. To this day, I will see owl behavior that makes me say, okay, what was that? Well, let's keep doing the homework. And then I'll be doing the homework and learning a new fact or getting a different insight or nuance of something that I thought I knew pretty well, but now I'm learning something more about it. And my feet will get itchy. I'll get ants in my pants. I got to go out and apply this homework, this new knowledge to my field work. Now, it's a lot of homework and field work, but also collaboration, what we're doing tonight, sharing information, all those things working together. I began to see that same pair of great horned owls more regularly. So I had to name them. And I named them Charles and Sarah. And here they are, Charles higher up on the left, Sarah lower down on the right. And you just see how stunningly beautiful great horned owls are. And they are great in every sense of the word, not only amazing and fantastic, but also bloody big. Great horned owls are the third tallest owl in North America, between 18 and 25 inches tall. So a foot and a half tall to just over 2 feet tall. That's a very large bird. With that height comes a lot of weight. Great horned owls are the second heaviest owl in North America, weighing between 2 to 5 pounds. Now, for some of you, that may not sound very heavy. You might be shocked that they don't weigh 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds. But please keep in mind that birds that fly, whether it's an oriole, an osprey, a dove, a duck, a warbler, a wren, all birds that fly have hollow bones. So their bones are very light, making their overall weight very light. And of course, feathers are as light as yes, feather. So that's heavy for a bird. One way I often think about it is if you saw an NBA team, men's professional basketball players, and you saw a player that was 6'2", you could say That is a short NBA player. Yes, it is. In my family, it would be a giant, but for the NBA, rather small. Now, speaking of size, if you look here, again, Charles the male on the left, Sarah the female on the right. In the birds of prey, owls, hawks, eagles, vultures, and falcons, almost categorically, almost all the time, the females are larger. Now, that said, Charles is a large male. He's 20 to 22 inches tall. Sarah, huge, as big as they get, 23 to 25 inches tall. One key thing about great horned owls, and this really colors and shades a lot of the things we're going to be talking about as we go on, is where great horned owls live. Great horned owls are the most widespread and commonly found owl in North America. They're found in every state but Hawaii, every province and territory of Canada, and if that wasn't enough, they also live in much of Latin America. So this is a gigantic geographic range. It's one of the largest geographic ranges of any bird of prey on the planet. And out of this geographic range comes a bit of a push and a bit of a pull, a bit of a paradox. On one hand, great horned owls are easy to study because you can find them in so many different, not just geographic unit, but so many different habitats, from coastal areas to city parks to mountains up to 14,000 feet high. But at the same time, since they are so widespread and so commonly found, it makes great horned owls hard to study and generalize about. So to illustrate this further, I always like to take our friend, the letter A. This is an owl that you can find in Alaska, Alberta, Arizona, Arkansas, Alabama, and I've run out of fingers, Argentina. So think of how different all of those places are, or any two of those places, and think of how different the lives of the owls are. So with great horned owls living in all these different places, from desert to mountains, swamps, everywhere in between, there are huge variations in their diet, territory size, population density, where they nest, and when they nest. So let's keep that in mind as we go further into great horned owl behavior. Now, to study the owls, it's very important that I go out frequently, and I do that. I go out 6 to 7 nights per week on average. A slow week is 3 to 4, and that comes out to over 300 nights a year. And I do this for two key reasons. One, I absolutely love it. You can't keep me away. Two, it gives me a lot of data with which to work. And I can compare many aspects of the owl's behavior from last night to the night before, the week before, the month before, and now going back years and years. And they continue to mix things up very frequently. Just this month, and we're not quite 3 weeks into October, I've seen the owls perch in 3 trees in which I've never seen them perch before, ever, in over 14 and a half years. Now, another key thing is not just going out frequently, but when you go out. I have found that, and my research has also demonstrated this to me, it's best to go out about an hour before sunset. This is when the owls are starting to wake up, they're starting to become active. You also have some daylight with which to work and look for them. That helps a lot. What also helps is wearing the right clothes and having the right gear with you. You see me here wearing the proper attire to present. Whether I'm presenting from my home, I'm still a guest. I want to dress properly, so I've got a jacket on, dress shirt, dress pants. Just want to reassure you, this is not what I look like when I go to study the owls. This is what I look like when I go to study the owls. Dark, muted colors. You never see me wearing a bright white shirt. Boots, backpack, cameras, binoculars, and yes, the car with the license plate Owlman. That's my car. Now, since we have so many sharp-eyed birders, naturalists, other keen observant people, you've probably noticed that the facial hair in the photo matches the facial hair more or less here in the flesh in front of you. And what you're seeing in both cases is winter plumage. Just a few weeks ago, I still had summer plumage, clean shaven. I have a brief spring plumage in May to about early June, shave the beard down to a goatee. So yes, good to know the stages of plumage for the owlman. So going out about an hour before sunset, again, this is when the owls start to wake up. And what do they do when they wake up? Well, they do what you and me and your dog and your cat and lots of other animals do. They stretch and groom. This is Charles doing one stretch, and I call this, for reasons that'll soon be clear, I call this the escalator stretch. And this massive expanse of wing and feathers, that's only one wing. The wingspan of a great horned owl, 4 to 5 feet wide. The other stretch that they do is the double wing stretch, both wings over their head as they fan out their tail feathers. So let's watch Charles do an escalator stretch, and you'll see why I call it that. And as he stretches out the one wing on the same side of his body, he also stretches out his leg and toes. And then he goes back to sleep. Looks just like an escalator folding out and then folding back in. So gorgeous, beautiful stretch to see. Now, they also groom very intensely. Here is Charles demonstrating the incredible neck flexibility that all owl species have. Charles is grooming his tail feathers with his bill. I can't scratch my nose with my shoulder or my shoulder with my nose. We have 7 vertebrae in our necks. Owls have 14. And not only that, their air and blood pathways have evolved so that when they turn their heads, their air and blood pathways turn too. Even if my skeletal system allowed me to turn my head more than 90 degrees, I'd probably pass out because I just cut off my air and blood supply. So grooming is very important. It keeps the owls clean, dry, warm. Like most owls, great horned owls fly silently, and their feathers make that possible. So maintaining their feathers not only for warmth and keeping dry, but also for silent flight is very important. Now they groom different parts of their bodies in different ways. And what we're going to see here next is Charles grooming what scientists refer to as the lower tummy and his upper legs. And you might hear a helicopter flying and a car or truck backing up. And this is a city park. This park is literally right in the middle of St. Louis, north and south, and surrounded by 3 4-lane roads on 3 sides and a U.S. interstate on the 4th side. So there's a lot of activity with those 13 million visitors per year. But let's enjoy Charles grooming away. Now, I've seen some of these behaviors literally thousands of times, and it doesn't get old. It's just as beautiful and fascinating and compelling today in 2020 as it was in 2005. And not only that, you see these little nuances of behavior. That escalator stretch you saw, Charles, that was a long, deep escalator stretch, which they do very frequently. They'll also do escalator stretches that are more angular, more shallow. The wing doesn't go quite as far as that. You see some nights with a lot of stretching and grooming, and other nights with very little, and other nights with somewhere in between. But another aspect that I love about studying these owls is not only is every night different and unique, there are some behaviors that I've only seen once or twice. And what I'm going to show you next is a behavior I've seen twice in just over 14 and a half years of studying these owls. And it was roughly this time of year. This is September 2015. It hadn't rained for 2 weeks, very dry period. And it began to rain. And if it's raining as the owls are getting active, they're not overly thrilled about it. They'll just kind of deal with it. It's kind of like going to work in the rain. You got your umbrella, you got your jacket. Well, in this dry period, Charles took advantage of it. He moved to the top of a dead tree, and you're not going to see just one wing, but you're going to see both wings and his tail feathers spread out as he took a shower. I never tire of seeing that. It's just so incredible to see that. And you can see and hear the rain. That was not a gentle early fall, sprinkle. That was capital R rain. So every night different, every night unique. Now, one behavior I don't see every night, but sometimes I get little streaks of it. And I had a streak recently when I saw this next behavior 6 nights out of 8. And that behavior is the owls ejecting pellets. If you look at Sarah here, you notice she's leaned over and you notice there's something coming out of her bill. Well, that is a pellet. Now, some of you are like me in present day 2020, and you can say, yes, I'm familiar with owl pellets. I've dissected owl pellets. Some of you might be like me back in 2005, and you're thinking to yourself, what's a pellet? Well, that is a pellet. All the things the owls cannot digest: fur, bones, feathers, insect exoskeletons, seeds undigested by the animal that the owl ate and now undigested by the owl. All those things get compacted in a special part of the owl's digestive tract called the gizzard, not the lizard, but the gizzard, and then ejected out of the mouth. Now, it doesn't hurt the owl to eject a pellet. It's a totally normal, natural process, but it's a lot like a cat with a fur ball. And like a cat with a fur ball, right after the owl gets the pellet out, it's very dramatic and traumatic, and it should be scored with an aria by Verdi. And then a few seconds later, they're fine. Now, before we watch a pellet get ejected, I want to give you a hint, a tease of some of the things that great horned owls can eat. This next photo is of the first partially intact skull that I ever found in one of their pellets. And this is the skull of a wood duck, a bird only a little smaller than a great horned owl. Wood ducks are very fast, they fly with great agility, but one of the owls caught, killed, ate, and digested that wood duck. So keep that in mind as we watch Charles eject the pellet. And I was just watching him on this day, but I was starting to get a hint that he might have a pellet. This white area on his throat, which all great horned owls have, it's called a gular sac, Gular, sac with no K, gular sac. I noted this area is starting to build up, and I thought, you might have a pellet. So I just kept watching, kept filming, and away he went. I hope many of you, like Rachel, laughed when you saw him twitch his head to his right shoulder. I had seen many pellet ejections before this. This was January 2013. I've seen many since then. I've seen the head tilt to the right shoulder a handful of times. A couple of years ago, I saw him eject the pellet and twitch his head to his left shoulder for the first time, and I've only seen it one other time. So again, every night different, every night unique. For many of us at this time of year in the fall, this is when we're really starting to hear great horned owls hoot more and hooting together in a duet. And that's just what their hooting together is called, just like two people singing. And duets have several purposes. And in this photo, the duet has Sarah high on the right, Charles lower on the left. This is how they declare territory. Hey, this is ours. This is how they defend territory. This is ours and stay out. But it's also how a new pair courts and how an established pair builds and maintains their pair bond. And that pair bond is very important for the whole mating and raising of their young. Now, we've talked about the size difference in great horned owls and most other birds of prey. But that size difference can be hard to tell apart. But I first want to teach you a cool term for that size difference. So when a female is larger, that phenomenon is called reverse sexual dimorphism. Let's try that together. Reverse sexual dimorphism. Now, when I teach this term, this knowledge comes with a significant challenge. I want you to use that term, reverse sexual dimorphism, at the next Zoom meeting, talk, Zoom thing you're in. Just see if you can slide it into the conversation. And in this photo, it's a good example of how it can be hard to tell the size apart, because Sarah, who's larger, is higher up and further away from the camera, and Charles, who is smaller, is lower down and closer to the camera. Thankfully, the vast majority of the time, great horned owls make it very easy to tell with adults, that's the male, that's the female. The male hoot is low, long, few, deep notes. Hoo, 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 hoo. The female hoot, while the females are larger, their heads are more narrow and their vocal cords are smaller. So the female hoot is actually shorter, softer, higher notes, and more often. Hoo, hoo, hoo. Now, it's also cool with time and practice, and also certain computer tools, you can also tell individuals apart, which is really neat to hear. And I, just for example, I have a friend in Colorado who studies great horned owls, and she posted a video of her pair having a duet. And I could tell, yes, that's the male and that's the female. They sounded totally different from Charles and Sarah. You could still tell male and female great horned owl, but still very unique differences. So let's watch them hoot together. And a duet is like any conversation. It starts slowly and gradually gets more intense. This is early in a duet. This is what I call first gear, just starting to hoot together. Charles higher on the right, Sarah lower down on the left. So listen for the difference in the hoot. Listen just how beautiful the hoots are. And also watch their bodies as they hoot together. Watch how their bodies move. Isn't that just gorgeous? It's such a beautiful sound. It's such a beautiful display. If you're having a good day and you go out and see owls, that day becomes a great day. And if you're having an average day and you go out to see owls, that day becomes a good day. And if you're having a bad day, trust me, take one, preferably two owls, and call me in the morning. So we've talked about a little bit about the hooting, but let's talk a little more about it. Notice how, like with the pellet, they puff up the white patch on the throat, the gular sac. Well, incredible thing about hooting, this very loud sound is made by the gular sac inflating with air, the air moving across the vocal cords, but the bill, the owl's mouth, remains closed. So they hoot with their bills closed. All of that sound is coming through the gular sac. Now, the gular sac is also bright white. And just from the few videos and photos we've seen the variety of colors, different shades of brown and orange and gray and white and black. But notice the feathers on the gular sac, bright white. And also notice how, as they hoot more intensely, they lift up their tail feathers. And the undersides of their tail feathers, also bright white. Out of all those colors of their different feathers, what's going to show up best as the sun gets lower and lower and is eventually completely set? Bright white is going to show up best. And you can be out on a cloudless, moonless night, very little in the way of silhouette of the owls, and you will see those white feathers fore and aft popping out like the beams of a lighthouse. So it's a vocal display. Hey, you're going to hear us. It's a visual display. Hey, you're going to see us. So really incredible and just never endingly fascinating, beautiful behavior to see. Now, one behavior that took me a long time to see was the owls hunting. They will hunt locally within their territory. Sometimes they are locavores, but more often than not, they fly off a good distance and then hunt from there. So it's very hard to reacquire them. Well, what is so hard about reacquiring them? Well, I could tell you, but I'd rather show you. This is Charles doing a very typical going off to hunt flight. And I'm going to show you this video, and then I'm going to ask you a few questions. So, great horned owls fly 20 to 40 miles per hour. So in that video, how far did Charles go? I don't know. Where did Charles land? I also don't know. One question I can't answer is it getting darker outside? Yes. Early on, this is when I would go home. I would thought, wow, I've had a great night. Sarah ejected a pellet. Charles did a double wing stretch and 3 escalator stretches. Sarah really did a lot of grooming. We had a great duet, but there is no way I will be able to find them. They fly 20 to 40 miles per hour completely silently. I don't know if they went 200 yards or 2,000 or 20. So early on, I would go home. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that hunting is such a key part of their daily lives, and it's such a key part of their lives overall that I had to try and find them hunt. And also, if I never tried, I would never succeed. So very rewarding, very challenging, but also very rewarding. And one of the things that makes it so rewarding is a sight like this. A beautifully silhouetted great horned owl, in this case, Sarah, doing the main method of great horned owl hunting. Perch and wait, look and listen. Perch and wait, look and listen. They're incredibly patient hunters. I've watched them hunt from one branch of one tree for 20 minutes and 30 minutes and 45 minutes and 60 minutes. And one night I watched Charles hunt from one branch of one tree for 90 minutes. And it's just amazing to see and know that something could happen at any time. Now, one of the things that really surprised me and hooked me further about great horned owls is what they eat. Now, as I mentioned, I knew very little about owls, but I've been studying wildlife all of my life, and I thought, okay, taking from what I know, great horned owls probably eat squirrels and other rodents, rabbits, small birds, and probably other small animals. And I start doing my homework, and my homework confirms that, but a really wide variety of small animals, not just birds and mammals, but also fish, amphibians, reptiles, insects, worms, and other invertebrates. Now, that wasn't too shocking. What was much more shocking was to learn that great horned owls eat a wide variety of small and not so small animals. Great horned owls eat skunks, raccoons, minks, muskrats, pet owners very seriously, small dogs, domestic cats. With birds, remember that wood duck skull? Yeah, they eat wood ducks, geese, they ducks across the board, geese. Remember the great blue heron? Yeah, they eat great blue herons that are twice their size, along with other herons and egrets. They eat hawks. Great horned owls eat other owls, including sometimes the two owl species in North America larger than themselves, snowy owls and great gray owls. They eat wild turkeys. There's even a documented case, just going back to mammals for a moment, of great horned owls killing and eating a bobcat in Arizona. So I had no idea that any owl could be a top of the food chain predator. Never mind that great horned owls were. So just amazing. In Forest Park in the general St. Louis area, there are only a handful of things that they cannot eat. Bald eagles, white-tailed deer, adult foxes, adult coyotes, armadillos. That's about it. Everything else is on the menu. Now, like all predators, they miss more than they hit. And that was a fact I knew from good books and good nature documentaries, but seeing the owls over the years miss and miss and miss more than they hit has really brought home more intensely how challenging it is to be a predator. Now, one of the more dramatic things to see them go for, whether it's successful or not, are bats in midair. And I'm going to show this video a few times because it happens very, very quickly. Sarah is going to come from the right side of the screen, the bat from the left, and the magic will occur in the middle.
There he goes. Whoa, going for bat. Jeez.
I also do my own color commentary, free of charge. I figured why not. So, pretty cool, pretty crazy, pretty dramatic. Well, let's watch it a little more slow down. Here comes Sarah, like a bat out of something. And she's blasting along, nice straight level flight. And here, finally, comes the bat. Now, bats are tough to catch. Many of them, like this species, most likely an Indiana bat or a little brown bat, small, agile, and also they have echolocation, airborne sonar. And I sometimes wonder what a great horned owl looks like on a bat's sonar scope. And I imagine it's loud, flashing, and red. So the bat essentially says, oh, bloody heck, I'm going to die. But Sarah says, well, not so fast. I'm really hungry. I would like to catch and eat you. So I'm just going to back up on Sarah. Notice how she goes from this very level flight to pulling this super intense fighter pilot Top Gun Jedi Knight turn. Look at that turn. That's some serious G's, people. Now, she's not going to try and catch the bat with her bill. No, she lowers her legs and talons and is going to try and pluck the bat, literally pluck it out of thin air. Now, the bat is now one wing length away from Sarah. It's under her right wing. Sarah realizes, nope, not going to happen. She tucks up her legs and talons and flies off. Now, if you look at the bottom left of my video player, you'll see that all of that effort took 1 second. Now that we've seen it broken down and fleshed and feathered out, let's watch it again. Not sped up, but at the speed at which it actually occurred.
There he goes. Whoa, going for bat. Jeez.
Just recently, I've seen Charles make a number of bat attempts, and one of them included one of the closest flybys I've ever had. He had just landed in a tree and turned around, saw a bat, and went for it, and I was with a buddy of mine, and we literally had to duck. Charles was 1 to 3 feet right over our heads. Simply incredible. Now, that recent bat attempt and this next video I'm going to show also illustrate an incredible aspect that has to be acknowledged with great horned owls, and that's the word opportunism. They see an opportunity and they go for it. Yes, they're very careful and patient hunters, but if they see an opportunity and they think they can get it, they will go for it. This is Charles on April 1st of 2019, and he had just woken up. He had done his stretching and grooming and so forth, and he had just flown over to this tree. It's the first tree he flew to when something caught his attention. And this is the first of 3 videos I'm going to show.
Just a big head bob. I'm thinking rabbit or squirrel. It's predatory. On the ground. It's a predatory attempt.
So I saw his talons and legs extend. He glided down. Right away, I knew that was a predatory attempt. I couldn't see what he was going for. It was covered in that winter creeper. But I just kept watching and seeing what was going on. So I saw Charles on the ground, and you're going to see him here as well. And you're going to see him moving with whatever he's caught.
He's back to me. Get closer, but I don't want to spook him.
And he was about 40 feet from me. Now, I couldn't tell what he had in his talons, but I knew he had something. And he flew up to a tree, manipulated the prey bit, and then flew to this next tree. I'm going to let you watch it and see if you can take a good guess on what he has caught and will soon be eating. That is an eastern cottontail rabbit. And he caught this just after his day began. I couldn't help but think of somebody, this was like somebody going to their job at 9 o'clock, and by 9:30, they come out of their office and say, well, I'm done. I just attended 2 webinars, I answered 40 emails, I answered 10 phone calls. Ooh, and I closed the Johnson account, and it's 9:30, I'm gonna go now. So Charles ate a bunch of the prey and then flew off, probably to hunt some more. But I remember thinking, what are you going to do? Are you going to go to the movies or something? Well, you're almost done before your night got started. So simply incredible to watch them hunt. Now, hunting is good in Forest Park, and that's been especially helpful because Charles and Sarah have had a few mouths to feed. Since 2006, they have had 23 outlets. And we're going to look at a few of the outlet highlights. I could talk about each year for our entire time, but simply amazing to see this and just so successfully. So 2008 was a remarkable year. It's the first year that they had 3 outlets. Great horned owls average 2 to 3, but this was the first year I saw them have 3. And it was the first year I named them. And I named them Bart, Lisa, and Maggie because, yes, I'm a huge fan of the Simpsons. But also for good scientific reasons, because the eggs are laid not close together, usually a day or 2 apart, sometimes 2 to 5 days apart. And they generally hatch in the order in which they have been laid. So in this case, there is the oldest, middle, and youngest. Now, personally, as one of 6 children, I'm very sensitive to the family dynamics involved. but there's a real age difference. Another owlet highlight, and one of my favorite owlet photos, came in 2012 with Christopher and Velvet. And I can hear many of you going, "Oh," and yes, they are incredibly cute and sweet. The owlets are so sweet that I'm frankly confident that they're so sweet they could give Vladimir Putin diabetes. So I'd like to test that out. But in the meantime, I just love watching these owlets. So this was Christopher and Velvet. Another favorite owlet photo was from the following year with three owlets again, Lawrence, Edward, and Stuart. And I'll never forget that beautiful May Day where I just walked into the woods and they were all there. Hey, Mark, what's going on? But I also love this photo because it shows the difference in, now several months old, the difference in age and size. Here on the right is the oldest owlet, Lawrence, who looks much more like an adult great horned owl, especially compared to the youngest owlet on the left, Stuart. And the middle child, Edward, is the one in the middle of the branch. And they left the parents' nest, they fledged in age order, and they dispersed. They left the parents' territory in age order in July, August, and September, respectively. And one last owlet photo. This is Sarah feeding Grace and Harold in 2015. Now, if you look at the size of the owlets compared to Sarah, you might be shocked to learn that those owlets are only 2 months old. An amazing thing about great horned owls is that they hatch from an egg about the size of a chicken egg. And here we have another paradox, another bit of push and pull. The babies grow physically like this, weeds on steroids. Their bodies, while they grow fast, their abilities take a long, slow time to catch up. Human parents, grandparents, imagine a human child with the body of a teenager and the abilities of a toddler. That's what these parent owls are dealing with. So these owlets hatched in mid-February and were there well into the late summer and early fall. So great horned owls have the longest breeding cycle of any owl in North America. If you're hearing a rumble, that is a thunderstorm going on outside. We get real natural sounds here. We spare no expense, no risks involved at all. Wow, it's pouring rain now. So yeah, longest breeding cycle of any owl in North America. It's 7 to 9 months. The owlets disperse, and then they start all over again. But let's watch some owlet antics. We've seen pictures. Let's watch a little video of the owlets. One of my favorite things to see the owlets do, especially when they have three owlets, is a classic sibling game, follow the leader. This is the three owlets they had in 2010, Reese, Malcolm, and Dewey. I was always a fan of the show Malcolm in the Middle. And one owlet is going to fly to a branch and the other two will follow. Now, again, keep in mind these owlets are about 2 months old, but watch at how big they are. And it's a windy spring day. Watch how clumsy they are. And also listen for this sound. That's called a begging sheep. That's the owlets saying, "Mom, Dad, we're over here and we're hungry." And it's been 4 seconds. We're going to do it again and again and again. They will make these calls hundreds of times per night. So let's watch Follow the Leader, big clumsy owlets, and listen for that begging sheep. So those are babies. They're absolutely huge, but they're totally still learning the ways of the world. Now, follow the leader is also, along with everything they do, every flight, every landing is a learning experience. And this is the following year, the two outlets they had, Dalton and Monica, and sometimes the follow the leader doesn't go quite well.
Here comes Monica. Whoa, right about her brother. Branch broke.
The branch breaks, and the outlet falls straight down. Now, thankfully, you hear me laughing, the outlet was able to find another branch to land on. Well, what if it missed that branch? What if there is no other branch for that outlet to land on? It could have crashed, whether in the tree or down on the ground, and seriously injured itself. Being an outlet is very tough. Many great horned owlets will not make it to their first birthday. Those that do, some of them will not make it to their second birthday. They can get to age 2 and 3 and then find a mate and a territory, they're going to be in good shape. But that's a long, tough haul to get to that road. Now, one of the things that's just so enchanting with the owlets is their curiosity. The whole world is new to them, and they're just fascinated by everything. And I hope you'll find this video of Grace in June of 2015 to be a good example of that. She was perched on a low branch of a fallen tree, and a firefly, a lightning bug, began to fly around her. And she's going to demonstrate that amazing neck flexibility we mentioned earlier. And I don't care how much yoga you've done, do not try this at home or anywhere else. But watch just how just amazed she is by this flying insect, which she's seen flying insects, but whoa, this one has lights. Firefly is going to come back to her left. And this is all happening in the city park. I know for many of you in and around your homes, your neighborhood parks, and if you've seen this or if you haven't seen it, I urge you to go out and try and see it. It's simply addicting. Now, a few weeks after I shot that video, we had a very sad development. Sarah died. On July 18th, 2015, I found Sarah in this very unusual area of their territory. And just from her posture and her expression that you see here, I knew she was ill or injured. And I found her well before sunset and stayed with her for an hour after sunset. And all of this grooming and stretching and hooting we've seen and talked about, she did nothing. She just sat there. And I came back the next morning because I was just so worried about her, and she was still there. Now, an owl will perch in a tree, in the exact spot in a tree, and sometimes return to that spot for multiple consecutive days. But there is such a qualitative difference in her behavior that told me that she had never left. And I went back that night and she was still there. And the analogy I could not escape was this is like seeing someone in the hospital and they're not getting better. She wasn't where she should be. She wasn't doing what she should be, and she did not look well. And she was there for 36 hours without moving. And the last I saw her was the morning of July 20th, 2015. And my friends and I searched for her remains for weeks. It was a very challenging time of year and area in the park to search, but we never found her. So a very sad time. I miss Sarah to this day. I miss her every day. I may never see a female great horned owl as amazing as her, as an individual, as a mate, as a mom, just off the charts. But through this sad time were two very important silver linings. And the first one is directly related to the owlets. The parent great horned owls are amazing parents. The owlets eventually have to disperse. They have to leave the parents' territory. And the parents will encourage this. The parents will reach a point where they stop feeding the owlets. And for those of you with teenagers, keep this in mind. Just, sit your children down. We love you, and you're done. When they're 18, 19, what have you. Sarah and Charles had already reached this point. They had stopped feeding the owlets a few weeks earlier. Now, if Sarah had died in June or earlier, the owlets probably would have died too. There are some documented cases of successful single parenthood in great horned owls, but trust me, those cases are very much the exception to the rule. The other silver lining was for me as a naturalist, I've been so lucky to see so much of Charles and Sarah, their individual behaviors, their behavior as a pair, as parents, their owlets, but I had never seen courtship. When I came upon them, they're already a pair. For how long, I'll never know. It's one of my top 5 questions I wish I could ask. And I thought, well, this is so sad, but maybe I'll get to see courtship. And I not only saw courtship, but Charles find a new mate. And this was the beginning of the last 5 years, nonstop owl drama whirlwind. I thought, okay, it's going to settle down. It hasn't settled down. So it began with Charles courting and finding a mate. He courted with 2 females in September 2015, one for a few weeks, the other only for a few days. Didn't work out with them. It's like dating. Like, hey, this is going well, and then it's not. Or, whoa, no thank you. Third female showed up October 7th, and the third female was the charm. And they mated and became a new pair. And I named her Olivia, and here she is. Beautiful female, a small female, about the same size as Charles, maybe a little smaller, as you'll see in this next picture. And while they mated, Olivia did not nest. So they mated very intensively and extensively, but she did not nest. And it's important to think about this, that nesting does not always happen. And if it does occur, it's not always successful. And frankly, people got a little cocky with Charles and Sarah over the years. They had 10 consecutive successful nesting seasons. And as time went on, people said, oh, how many owlets are they going to have? And I would answer that question in 3 ways. 1, I don't know. 2, a lot of things have to go very well and in the right order, in the right manner for that question to be answered in a positive way. And 3, that expression, don't count your chickens before they hatch? Yeah, you can pretty much apply that to anything that reproduces. So no nesting, so a very different year right there. And then as we got into the spring of 2016, Olivia started to wander away from Charles. I began to see her, instead of usually within about 100 yards of each other, and that general 100-yard range, that could be 20 yards one night, 10 yards the next, 78 the next, but usually within 100 yards, I started to see her several 100 yards away from Charles. And then she'd come back. And then I began to find her over half a mile from Charles. And then she'd come back. And some nights I couldn't find her at all. And then she'd come back. And it quickly became, will I see Olivia? And where will I see her? And there was no pattern to her behavior. Gone 2 nights, back 4. Gone 1, back 1. Gone 3, back 1. Gone 2, back 2. So very confusing, but her not nesting and then spending time away from Charles created a vacancy. And vacancies get filled. Nature abhors a vacuum. And very soon after this began, in April 2016, a larger and very aggressive female showed up. And she quickly shoved out Olivia and started to chase Charles around. This is the intruding female on one of the first nights that she was in Charles and Olivia's territory, and she was perched in this photo, she's perched in one of the trees that Charles and Olivia were perching in very frequently around that time. Imagine you leave your home, you run errands, you do whatever you need to do, And you come back and you flip on the living room light, and they're in your favorite chairs, a complete and total stranger saying, "Good evening. Mm, lovely. Can I have another one? A little more ice this time." How would you react? Well, Charles reacted as you probably would. He was not happy about this. But males are adaptable. 10 days later, they began to court, and they eventually became a pair. And I had to name this female something that matched her aggressive behavior, aggressive nature. And I quickly decided on the name Samantha, as in Samantha from Sex and the City. Very aggressive female, very, the man killer type. So now we have new pair, Charles and Samantha. So Olivia was only with Charles for 6 months, and Samantha showed up after the 2015-16 nesting season, but before the 2017 nesting season. So Charles and Samantha did nest in 2017 and 2018, the same hollow each year, and unfortunately, both nesting attempts were unsuccessful. So again, goes back to how I'd answer that question about Charles and Sarah. Are they going to have Alex this year? Let's wait and see what happens. And each of those years, the nesting attempts were quite different. And if you're looking for Samantha, there she is, hidden away, just the top of her head peeping out above the lip of that hollow. Now, last year, 2019, I was very excited to see a new nest spot chosen. I had never even seen this spot checked out by Charles or any of his mates. And unfortunately, we had another unsuccessful year. Two very brief nesting attempts, one of 2 nights, and then it stopped. And a week later, Samantha returned to the nest, and you can barely see her tucked in there. She returned to this cavity and nested for 1 night and then stopped. And that winter and early spring were very confusing and ended in, unfortunately, another sad note because Samantha died on April 3rd. She had a very gradual and confusing decline. Throughout the late winter and early spring, Samantha was showing simultaneously signs of illness or injury, and at the same time, vigorous health. The peak or the absolute nadir of this was a night in early March when I was with my friend Brenda Henty, and we found Samantha very low in a tree, body spread out and not moving, and we thought she was dead. And we watched her and exchanged condolences and sympathies and just wondered what had happened. 20 minutes later, she was grooming, stretching, and then flying off at great speed. It was like watching someone passed out on a sidewalk and then 20 minutes later, brushing themselves off. Okay, I'm going to work. Things unfortunately became much more clear when she took a bad turn in late March. She was found by a park visitor on the ground, and the park visitor saw a red-tailed hawk attack her. Now, red-tailed hawk would not attack a healthy adult great horned owl. Now, we were able to get her to one of our local raptor rehabilitation places, a fantastic organization called the World Bird Sanctuary. But she arrived in really poor health, underweight, dehydrated, in shock. They couldn't even take blood work for the first few days. And despite incredible care, she died on April 3rd, just too ill. They performed an examination after she died, an examination called a necropsy, and the hospital staff found the worst bacterial infection that they had ever seen. And this organization has been around for 30 years or so. And there was just nothing that could have been done. The infection had spread to multiple key organs, including liver, kidneys, ovaries, her stomach lining. So again, a very sad time. And 2 days later, on April 5th, 2019, I'm watching Charles, and I'm wondering aloud, I wonder if and when I'll see another female great horned owl. And then I turned my head, and about 20 to 30 feet away was this female great horned owl. Another huge one, Sarah size. Samantha wasn't as big as Sarah. She was definitely bigger than Olivia, but not as big as Sarah. This female, massive like Sarah, 23 to 25 inches tall, literally right there. That night, they had a really intense courtship duet. Charles seemed very game. And so we have another female. Another female means another name. And I named her Danielle. And again, this was after the nesting season and well before the next one. And just a few weeks after this, about 6 weeks after Danielle arrived, we had a really crazy turn of events. Charles moved his territory in mid-May, about a half mile to the east. And I wish he would answer his emails that I send him, but I have really no idea why. There's several possible reasons, either taken alone or two or three combined. But at the end of the day, none of those, taken in any manner, fashion, or form, makes me say, oh yes, because of A and B, this is why he did that. Now, this was part of his hunting territory, so it was part of his general range, but it's sort of like saying, hey, Mark, I saw you in the grocery store on Saturday. Yeah, that's when I'm in the grocery store. And then you happen to go back on Wednesday, and there I am living in the grocery store, and not just Wednesday, but Thursday. And he stayed there for the next 5 months. And I had to start really from scratch. It was back to the drawing board. I had to learn his perch and roost sites. Danielle was over there with him, but she also, I was seeing her far less frequently than Charles. So a crazy, crazy time. And I was very relieved when 5 months later, mid-October of 2019, he moved back. This is Charles in one of his favorite hooting spots there. And we're totally thrilled to have him back. It was like, okay, the world's back to normal. But we had a less normal development as Danielle was only showing up here and there. So here we are in the fall where they should be hooting together in duets, declaring territory, defending territory, courting a new couple, building up that pair bond. And I had last fall 2 periods of over 10 consecutive days, one of 12 days, one of 16 days of not seeing Danielle. It was, I remember thinking, the wedding is around the corner and you have to get to know each other. And where are you? Well, they did nest last year. She finally became more consistent in early to mid-December, just before the rehearsal dinner. She began to nest on December 31st. Beautiful cavity that Sarah had used twice in 2008. That's where she had Bart, Lisa, and Maggie. And then again in 2012. And I love this cavity. It's a hollow and a cottonwood because you can look at it from a safe distance right at eye level. And as you see, it faces due west. So the setting sun just pours in there. So really excited. The nesting was going great until it failed. And it failed on February 18th. Since Sarah last nested there in 2012, the cavity, this hollow, it's hard to see with Samantha there, but a hole in this back wall developed. And on February 18th, she flew out of the nest to take one of her brief breaks. When the female great horned owl is nesting, they're on the nest for over 23 hours a day, taking brief little breaks, stretch, groom, defecate, eject a pellet, maybe get a bite to eat, and then back to the nest. She returned to the nest, but didn't get back in. I saw her clack her bill, a very aggressive behavior. I saw her fly away and fly back. I saw movement in the nest. And from everything that I saw, I'm unfortunately all too confident that raccoons got in that hole in the wall. And the timing of this was especially unfortunate. At this point, the eggs were either just about to hatch or just had hatched. So really tough to see, but also again illustrated that every year is its own evolution, its own process, that it's very tough. And I couldn't be overly upset at the raccoons. Why? Well, just in the nesting period alone, I saw Charles make 5 and Danielle make 1 attempts on raccoons. And you have to think, how many raccoon orphans have they created? How many raccoon widows and widowers have they made? And as I wrote in my blog, there are no heroes and villains in nature. And I was really sad and really hoping that the nest would be successful, but also, hey, this is nature. Now, after that, we kind of had 3 months of normal activity. Charles in the territory, often quite vocal. But Danielle kind of going back to what, not kind of, very much going back to what she did in the fall, only showing up here and there. But I still continue to see new behaviors. This never ends. And what I'm going to show you next, this is in early April of this year. And this is behavior that I've never seen. And I was watching Charles groom and stretch, and I turned my head back, and I saw that in his talon, one of his talons, one of his toes, one of his groups of toes, he had a large feather of his own, a flight feather, maybe a tail feather, and he started to groom his bill with that feather. And this went on for minutes, and you're gonna get to see a nice section of it. I did not need to do the homework. I searched my memory banks and I thought, I've never seen that. I've never read about that. Not only with owls, I've never seen that or read about that with any other bird. And I reached out to some regional, national, and international owl experts that I'm very honored to have come to know a little over the years. And to a person, when I sent them that footage, they wrote back to me and they said, Mark, we have seen that with captive owls, because when you have an animal in captivity, there's a lot you get to see that you may not would have seen if they're in the wild. You just have more time with them. So to see a wild owl do that is really something. And thank you for sharing that with us. So again, years later, I'm still seeing new things. So I mentioned 3 months of normal. Well, why 3 months of normal? Well, we had another really weird time yet again in mid-May where Charles disappeared after May 14th. And I did not see him for 6 weeks. In 2019, I was freaked out because I didn't see him for 10 days. This just blew that out of the water. And I continue to be very grateful for the help that I received with friends. We were able to scour Forest Park. But after 6 weeks of not seeing him, of not hearing him, I made the toughest call that Charles was most likely dead. And it was really tough to make that call, to share that news with people, because a whole community of people in different ways, in different manners and facets, a whole community of people has grown around these owls. And it was really tough to really bum everyone out with more bad news in 2020. But I kept an eye on his territory. I wanted to see if another owl would move in. And while we were searching for Charles on June 10th, I found a male great horned owl about a half mile from his territory. So I was keeping an eye on that guy. And then out of nowhere, Charles returned. July 13th, he's back in the core of his territory. Immense relief, not only for myself, but for all these people. This total roller coaster from grief to true celebration. And yeah, he's back and hanging out very consistently. But now you're probably wondering, well, what's up with Danielle? Danielle has gone from here and there to I don't know where. I haven't seen her definitively since mid-March. I had a possible sighting on April 16th. It was the worst, among the worst conditions you could have. I was watching Charles, a huge great horned owl flew by me, landed. I could see the owl, but I didn't have a very good angle. And just like we had tonight, just coming down the street, literally was a thunderstorm. And I go out in all weather, triple digits, all the way down to single digits, snow, ice, but I do not play around with thunderstorms. So I don't know if that was Danielle. I haven't seen or heard her at all. I haven't seen Charles courting with new females. I really thought by this time, even 2 weeks from earlier than now, that I would have had answers about, is Danielle still in the picture? Is Charles courting with new females? And I don't. But like everything else, you just observe, document, spend the time, see what happens. And you only know what will happen after it happens, and you just have to be there to see it. So, in conclusion, just want to say that while we've talked a lot and seen a lot, this is just a taste of my many years of studying these owls. And you can learn about them in many ways, including if you ask Rachel and her folks to have me back. I would love to come back and present, well, hopefully, especially one day in person. I have 3 other talks, including 2 more specific ones on Charles and company, their hunting and feeding, their mating, nesting, and owlets. We're really going to these subjects in even greater depth. And then my newest talk, how to find an owl in your neighborhood. Because a lot of people want to see owls, and a lot of people often have never seen an owl. Leading owl prowls, I regularly have people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s who have never seen an owl in the wild. Speaking of owl prowls, I'll talk about that in just a moment, but you can also find me online. There's my email address if you have a more in-depth question or a follow-up question or what have you. My blog, very active on YouTube. I'm also the co-administrator of a Facebook community called Great Horned Owls. And you can also follow me on Twitter, @ForestParkOwls. And yes, I invite one and all to join me on an owl prowl, not all at once. Owl prowls are a 2-hour tour where we start, again, about an hour before sunset. And I lead them on weekdays and weekends all year long and all the time. And a very typical example was last year. I led 76 owl prowls last year, and that ain't the record. With owl prowls, please email me 3 to 4 dates. That way we have a range of dates with which to work. Once we set a date, I'll determine that time, again, based on sunset. For now, during the pandemic, I'm only taking out smaller groups, 1 to 4 people. Again, my email address right there, mglenshaw@gmail.com. And last but not least, I really want to thank the Wichita Audubon Society, Rachel, all of her members and everything for having me out here. I really want to thank all of you for watching tonight, and I cannot wait to answer your questions while I keep my information up there. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. This has been a wild roller coaster. I've got my friends like texting me on the side about like, can you believe what happened? I'm so invested now.
Thank you.
I,
I
I do want to mention, I put it in the chat, but for our video streaming, the videos were coming through the stream itself a little bit difficult to see. So I did on the side put together a playlist of the videos from your YouTube channel that I was able to find. So people can watch those HD versions straight on your channel if they would like to. And I shared that in the comments there. And
thank you. I'm sorry about the video. It's so many moving pieces.
I know. And sometimes you think you have everything sorted out and it just doesn't work. But because you have such a great library of content of these guys on your YouTube channel, it was pretty easy to find some good stuff there. So I do have some questions for you, and I have several here in the beginning that are about, like you were saying, questions on finding owls in their neighborhood. The first one was from Sin. Is there a time of year that you can call owls to you?
Yes, there is, Sin, and thank you for your question. There is And in some ways, the easiest time to do that is also simultaneously the worst time to do that. And for many owls in the northern hemisphere, that time of year is now. And the what makes it the bad time is that this is when many owl species are courting and building up to nesting. And any bird call should be used very carefully, very judiciously, because at a minimum, you're saying, "Hi, I'm a total stranger in your home." Imagine you're at home, you're feeling nice and snug, it's a lovely evening, and you hear total stranger's voice from the next room. You just got much less snug and comfortable. But this time, and especially for many owls in the next few months, this is where they're not only building up to mating and nesting, but also mating and nesting. So if you're playing a call or using your own voice, you're not only saying, "I'm here in your home," but you're going, "Where are the girls?" So you're intruding, and not just in a, sort of, okay, yeah, yeah, whatever, but in a very serious way, interrupting the breeding cycle. And they often will not be very happy about that. You also have to be very careful about who else is listening, literally, who else is listening. If you live in Missouri, I encourage you all to subscribe to the incredible magazine, Missouri Conservationist, a free publication for all Missouri households, put out by the Missouri Department of Conservation. Award-winning, incredible magazine. I was beyond honored and thrilled to have my work mentioned in an article about this time last year. One of their brilliant photographers, a gentleman named Napadol Pauthong, Nop, as everyone calls him, is from Thailand, and he's been out to photograph the owls. In fact, if you look up great horned owls on NBC's website, one of the pictures you'll see is Sarah and one of her young from 2012. And it's bittersweet to see that. It's like, oh, there's Sarah, and oh man, that's so tough. Nop told me the following story about how a friend of his is really good at calling in barred owls, not barn, B-A-R-N, but B-A-R-R-E-D. And barred owls have that famous call. Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? And barred owls are good size, but they're not as big as great horned owls. So Nop's friend calls in a barred owl. They're having a nice chat back and forth. And out of nowhere comes a great horned owl, and it kills the barred owl, ripping its head right off. And there's Nop's friend horrified because he knows that he not only rang the dinner bell, he gave the GPS coordinates. So actually, a gentleman messaged me today about, oh yeah, I had some barred owls near my home, and then I played a great horned owl call, and I didn't see them for like 2 nights, and oops. And I said, oh yeah, oops indeed. So end of the story is playing calls using your own voice, something that you want to use very carefully, very judiciously. I very rarely have used calls, just to show you how just freaked out and panicked I was about Charles last summer and this most recent summer. This is one of the few times that I've ever played calls with any regularity, and I was getting no response. So thank you, Sid. Lovely question.
Actually, a follow-up question there. Is there, or what would you consider to be a good context that you would want to call an owl? Does that context even exist in your opinion?
It does. One of the tricky things about studying owls, and something we've talked on, and I'm more than happy to talk to you more on, is just finding them and censusing them. Owls in Christmas bird counts, they often don't come up that much. And for all these reasons we've talked about. So there have been in recent years some incredibly carefully done, detailed owl census projects using calls, but with very strict guidelines in terms of the number of calls, what's called, and when it's called, and all sorts of things. A big project a good example of that is a big project done by Discover Owls in Canada, a very large nationwide owl study in Canada. And again, something done very carefully locally in St. Louis, and I'm sure, and I definitely know other parts of the eastern United States, northern saw-whet owls, bandy northern saw-whet owls, luring them to mist nets by playing calls. The World Bird Sanctuary that I mentioned earlier, they're part of that North American-wide banding effort of northern saw-whet owls. But again, being carefully done by experts and volunteers, but not just, oh, hey, everyone, go out and play a northern saw-whet call. So yes, there is a time and a place.
Awesome. Thank you. That's a really thorough answer. So Carol mentioned seeing owls behind her home, or hearing them rather, all the time, but never seeing them. And I know that you kind of during your presentation talked about tips to find owls, but could you maybe reiterate some of your best tips for finding them when you maybe can't see them, but you know
Sure,
they're there? Yeah.
definitely. And Carol, I don't want to overassume, but I've had these conversations many times, and often my first question is, do you go looking for them? And unfortunately, too often the answer is no. And that's kind of in a way hard to follow up on. The first step is taking that first step. And hopefully you are, and even if you are and you're not finding them, don't be discouraged. It's very challenging. Another very technical piece of advice I like to give, if you hear the owls that away, go that away. And if they move this away, go this away. Charles last night moved a few trees over, going south, then blasted off south. My friend Alexis and I, we saw him, we had a good heading, and then he disappeared, and we're following him. And then we heard him 100 yards to the north. And that was all in 5 minutes, give or take. So in terms of looking for them, time of day around sunset is the best. There are two other times, the middle of the night, that can be very tough. Also around sunrise can be good. I always say visually, the mental search image that you want to form is of a conical vertical shape. I remember leading a lady on an owl prowl, and she had a tough time finding Charles, which is totally understandable. When she finally saw him, she said, "Oh, he looks like a big pine cone." And I said, "Yes, brilliant. That's awesome." So the owls do almost everything standing up. And if you look at tree branches are mostly at an angle or horizontal. So the vertical shape of the owl contrasts with the vertical or angular branch that they're on. So that's one thing to look for. You also want to look down on the ground for pellets and their droppings. And owl droppings are bright white. They're often referred to as whitewash. It looks just like what Tom Sawyer was painting the fence with. And if you see pellets and whitewash, does it mean that there's an owl right there? No. Does it mean that an owl has spent some time there? Yes. Keep in mind that spot. Take a look up. Warning calls of other animals are incredibly important, whether it's an eastern screech owl or western screech owl or a huge great horned owl. These owls are all predators. And the bigger the owl, the more things they eat. So the bigger the owl, the fewer friends they have. Charles says to other animals, "Come over for dinner," and things get lost in translation, frankly. What's for dinner? Oh, it's a surprise. Um, so I have found the owls by listening to warning calls of countless bird species, crows, jays. Most helpful in the summer for Charles and Company, American robins. I've also seen them harassed by Cooper's hawks, powerful predators in their own rights, warning calls of eastern gray squirrels. And this is a great way to find any predator. And it could be a hawk, an owl, a snake, your neighbor's cat, but it's definitely something key to look for. And if you find them, make a note of the spot, memorize the angle that you had. The difference between seeing an owl and not seeing an owl sometimes is a movement of this much of your body or a tilt of your head of this much in your eyes. And again, never underestimate that camouflage. One thing that I often recommend to people, something that I just started doing right away as I got to notice trees and groups of trees that the owls were using more frequently, is naming trees. And one of the things that can be very tricky with owls is that some species, including great horned owls, will use different trees in different seasons. And Charles averages per season 10 to 15 different spots, and we'll sometimes use 15 to 20. And will some of these spots get repeated fall after fall, spring after spring? Yes. And simultaneously, spots go and spots come back. Where he's been 7 or 8 times this October, I've never seen him in that tree ever. And that's the second of 3 trees that he's used in the last 4 weeks without precedent. So it's one of those things that, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. But with time and practice, um, it can be done. And anytime you study anything in nature, it's not practice makes perfect. It's practice makes better. And that can be tough and discouraging sometimes, but it's also okay. You can do this. And some of these things took me 2 years to not get great at or even good at, but get okay at. Like imagine doing a master's degree. After 2 years, you do your final projects and they hand you your grades back. Congratulations, ma'am. It's your best work. It's a C minus. That's what my first 2 years were like. And I will still have days where, well done, Mark. After 14 and a half years, it's a D plus. Well done. So thank you. Excellent question.
And a follow-up, which is similar. I noted that we've been talking primarily about great horned owls tonight, but are these tips and insights easy to apply to other types of owls as well?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. With honing in and differences with other owl species, but most of that will apply. Another thing that I do, and I throw this out to everyone in the St. Louis area, I do what I call owl consultation. People contact me and say, hey, I've seen these owls occasionally, or I hear them, but I've never seen them. Can you help me out? And I said, yes, I'd be happy to come over and conduct owl consultation. Now, I don't want to give the impression that this is, a $500 an hour thing. It's $700 now. No, an adult beverage. Okay, make it 2 adult beverages. Now, and I always tell people, look, please don't think that I'm going to show up and in 5 minutes say, oh, yes, there's Samuel. He's 6. He's a Libra, very sensitive. He prefers prairie voles to meadow voles. But at a minimum, I'm going to give you some of the tools of where to look, how to look, and really, very importantly, to your local area, where to look. Like, hey, concentrate here. This is really good potential. And I've had owl consultation where we find owls and where we don't, but then 2, 3 days later, hey, remember that group of trees you told me to check out? We just saw them there last night. Thank you.
Oh, that's awesome. I have one more question here from Deborah, who wanted to know what exactly you mean by an unsuccessful nesting attempt. It seems like that could mean a lot of different things. So could you maybe qualify that for us a bit?
Yes, that is a fantastic question. Unsuccessful nesting for pretty much any bird is young not reaching the stage of fledging, leaving the parent's nest. And that can manifest itself, unfortunately, in many ways, to eggs not hatching, to one egg hatching, another not hatching, but the young dying, whether lack of food, being eaten by a predator, even eggs eaten by a predator. It's basically you didn't get the owls to the point that they fledged, that they left the nest. One big question I have, which I cannot answer, I saw Charles and Sarah have 23 young in 10 consecutive nesting seasons. Did they ever lay an egg that did not hatch? Possibly. Did they lay an egg that hatched but that owlet did not live. Also possibly. I saw them have 2 to 3 owlets in every year except 2007. They had 1 owlet that year. Occasionally, great horned owls will have 4 to 5. But in 2007, when they had 1 owlet, was there a second egg, a second owlet? I don't know. But yes, it basically means not getting to fledging. And even if an owlet fledges, sometimes that is, I'll rephrase that, fledging frequently for great horned owls is one of the most dangerous times of their lives. I liken it to, imagine a human child taking their first steps in Times Square at rush hour. What could go wrong? Sit down. This is going to take a while. So I hope that fleshed and feathered out unsuccessfully.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's all the questions that I have, but if anybody who's tuning in still has any further questions for Mark, you know how to get a hold of him. You've had it up there on the screen this whole time. His email is mglenshaw@gmail.com. And I'm going to just mention that our next meeting is going to be on November 17th. We're going to be hearing Alan Saylor's presentation, Life's a Beach, The Struggle of Coastal Shorebirds. Same time, same place, online. And then our next meeting is not until January. So we'll be kind of evaluating the COVID situation at that time to see whether we'll be meeting in person or doing this virtual presentation once more. But anyway, that's, I think, it. And by golly, we managed to talk about owls for almost 2 hours, Mark. I should not be surprised. But it was wonderful having you tonight. It was wonderful getting to know your owls and your work and hearing all the stories. And I'm going to be thinking about that barred owl getting lured in for the rest of the night, probably.
Thank you. And I'm sorry to freak out the barred owl story. I freaked out some people with that one, but I think it's an important example. And again, Rachel, thank you, Wichita Audubon. Thank you, everyone who watched. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody else says thank you. Great presentation. You'll have to go read the chat comments later on. But yeah, great presentation. At that time just flew by, and I hope you have a great rest of your night, both you, Mark, and everybody at home who's been enjoying this with us.